Hey monsters, thanks for tuning in to Murder Murder News, the true crime cult for the latest breaking news, murdery memes, TV reviews, podcast recommendations, and all things spooky. Look, we really want to start this true crime cult, and you can have your own baby goat if you join and bring a friend. I'm television's Aurora Katie.
And I'm Angelina. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and recruit all of your friends to join our cult. This is the Week in True Crime.
Murder, murder, news.
Ghislaine Maxwell, the one-time girlfriend and longtime associate of Jeffrey Epstein, has been hiding out since his supposed suicide last year. After rumored sightings at Scott Borgeson's estate, on a yacht in New Zealand, and at an In-N-Out Burger of all places, she was finally discovered to have been hiding out in a gorgeous 156-acre property in New Hampshire. She was arrested last week and brought to the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn and will soon stand trial in New York. Maxwell was charged with 6 counts, including conspiracy to entice minors to travel in order to engage in illegal sex acts, transportation of minors for criminal sexual activity, and perjury, all related to Epstein's case. Many are also speculating about whose dirty deeds Ghislaine's court appearances might uncover. Since Jeffrey Epstein's arrest, we've seen several photos of President Trump socializing with both Epstein and Maxwell, though as some are quick to point out, their companionship knows no political affiliation. To quote a meme I've seen floating around, it's interesting to watch supporters of both parties trying to roast their opponents by posting photos of members of the other party posing with the same human trafficker. Maxwell's lawyer reportedly said that her and Jeffrey Epstein's court documents could implicate hundreds of people. It is said that she kept a secret stash of sex tapes for blackmail purposes or as a get-out-of-jail-free card. Ghislaine was known to rub elbows with celebrities and the wealthy elite at parties and events all over the world. An Instagram account, @celebswithghislaine, shows Maxwell pictured with an array of celebs and high-profile people over the years. One particular photograph has been floating around depicting Ghislaine Maxwell and accused sex offender Kevin Spacey sitting on thrones at Buckingham Palace. Generally, the public is not allowed to sit on thrones during tours, as it is seen as a sign of disrespect for the monarchy for anyone other than the royal family to sit on them. According to the Daily Telegraph, who released the photo in question, they must have had a special invitation to do so from Prince Andrew, which really speaks to the relationship between Prince Andrew and his visitors. As CNN's Max Foster put it, though sitting on a throne is seen as hugely disrespectful, Prince Andrew invited them in and actually allowed this event to happen, which reads as a metaphor for the way many of Ghislaine's supposed transactions went down. With a case this high profile, possibly implicating any number of the world's celebrities and wealthy elite, it can be difficult to separate the conspiracy theories from the facts, as even the facts sound so preposterous. A couple of wild theories in particular have caught my eye as I pored over the details of decades of exploitation and abuse. First, let's revisit one of the last photos ever taken of JonBenet Ramsey. This woman off to the side looks startlingly similar to Ghislaine Maxwell, and while some have speculated that it might be Patsy Ramsey or JonBenet's coach, from the angle of the photograph, the resemblance to Maxwell is striking. The photo appears to be real and unedited, but of course we are not sure it's her. Ghislaine Maxwell and the Ramseys did share the same attorney's office, which has led many to believe that they were acquainted. Could she have been involved in JonBenet's mysterious death? Or could this be evidence that Ramsey was trafficked before her murder? These speculations sound a little absurd until you hear the true stories of real-life parents like Tamar Hodel, the daughter of the surgeon suspected in the murder of the Black Dahlia. As Tamar's brother Steve put it, sexualized at an early age, her life continued out of control for decades. The cycle continued. The abused became the abuser, creating more pain and suffering for her own 5 children. Tamar allowed strangers to pay to have sex with her children. You can hear more about this case on the podcast Root of Evil, as well as the TNT series I Am the Night. And remember this sketch from the Madeleine McCann case? Nightmerica podcast posted a side-by-side photo of Ghislaine Maxwell with the sketch and sent us down a rabbit hole. The woman seen in the sketch was said to have spoken Spanish, in which Maxwell is fluent, and was seen asking a man, "Have you got the child?" Of course, the most popular theory in all of this is that Ghislaine might die in prison before she can implicate any big names, either of an apparent suicide or even of COVID-19. This all comes from the widely held belief that Jeffrey Epstein did not commit suicide, but was silenced in a secret murder plot. We would love to hear your theories on other big cases in which Ghislaine Maxwell could have been involved and who might be implicated once her case goes to court. And we can't wait to see how it all unfolds. This case is huge for sexual assault and human trafficking survivors everywhere and really sheds a light on the dangerous abuse of power and wealth that goes on in this world.
We're going to stick to true crime conspiracies for a bit with an update on the murder of Vanessa Guillen. We first reported on Vanessa's disappearance on our May 1st episode, and the Army officially confirmed on Sunday that the remains found on June 30th near the Leon River, miles from Fort Hood, are those of Vanessa Guillen. Vanessa was last seen around 11:30 a.m. on April 22nd in the parking lot of her barracks. Her mother reported that Vanessa had been sexually harassed by a sergeant who was even following her around when she would go running and work out. Vanessa was too afraid to report a file against him because she thought the military would not take it seriously. Vanessa's family had not given up on finding her, and they offered an award for information leading to her discovery. We now know that Vanessa was bludgeoned to death with a hammer in the armory where she worked, and her body was then transported to the river by alleged killer Aaron David Robinson and his girlfriend, Cicely Ann Aguilar. Vanessa's family believes that Aaron murdered her because she had threatened to report him for harassment, but Aaron said he did it because Vanessa had found out about his affair with a married woman, presumed to be Cicely. On July 2nd, Crystal Martinez, who is Vanessa's best friend and the person who started the #FindVanessa movement, died in a car crash. Krista, a veteran stationed in Fort Hood, also said that she had been harassed on base. She has since been very vocal about sexual harassment at Fort Hood. Something feels very suspicious about this whole situation, especially when you take into account that there have been several unsolved murders regarding Fort Hood soldiers. On March 1st, Shelby Taylor Jones was found outside of a convenience store, but police believe he was killed 40 minutes earlier at a nearby strip club and then moved. On March 14th, Asia Klein, Shaquan Markel Allred, and Freddie Berningo de la Cruz Jr. were all found shot dead in an apartment in Kylene, Texas. Shaquan and Freddie were both soldiers at Fort Hood. On May 18th, Brandon Scott Rosecrans was found shot to death on a residential street near the Army base with his Jeep on fire nearby. On June 19th, remains were found that were thought to be those of Vanessa, but they were actually the remains of Gregory Morales, who went missing in August of 2019. I don't know what is happening in Texas, but something seems very unsettling to me. We want to hear what your theories are down below because something's up, y'all.
This week, we are very excited to be watching Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix. Unsolved Mysteries is the true crime origin for many true crime enthusiasts, and it definitely sparked our interest as kids. Netflix just launched a new 6-episode season, which is definitely not enough. They cover disappearances, mysterious deaths, and even a small-town alien story. What's most exciting is that series co-creator and executive producer Terry Dunmuir says that tips have been flooding in since the show's recent release. He says they've received over 20 credible tips, and it has brought some of the cases featured on the show much closer to being solved, most notably the Alonzo Brooks case. This is actually the coolest thing about the Unsolved Mysteries series on the whole. Ever since the original series premiered in 1987, the show has served to share the stories of these unsolved cases with the world and get help from the community to finally bring justice to the families involved. More than 260 cases from the original series went on to be solved thanks to viewer tips. So get watching, get those tips in, and help solve those unsolved mysteries. Aurora, how are you liking the show? I know that was a huge one for you as a kid.
Yeah, it's definitely my true crime origin. My mom watched it all the time when I was a kid, and I loved it so much. And I'm embarrassed to say that I haven't finished it yet. Like, something feels a little off for me, and I think what it's missing is narration.
Yeah.
And like, I loved Robert Stack. I understand that like clearly we can't have him back for this even if we wanted to.
Right.
But I feel like I wouldn't be too picky about the narrator, but something that made it more like feel a little bit more cohesive would be better for me. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree that sort of like dry like narration throughout the whole series is like it feels like a real classic like true crime show vibe, and like that's kind of missing for sure.
He was so spooky.
Yeah, just that deep voice, you know. But I think it's cool that the show came back for another run anyways, because like I didn't realize that it had been so helpful in solving all these cases in the past. That's definitely super positive. So I'm really happy that it's back. And the one case that I mentioned that's getting really close to being solved, the Alonzo Brooks case, is a case of the reason this is such a mystery is because nobody saw anything, and like nobody will talk about having seen anything leading up to this event, any sort of racial tension, any sort of issues between any of these people. So it's so mysterious, but when everyone sees it on television, somebody's got to say something, right?
Right, agreed. We are so excited to have Mel with us from this week's favorite podcast, Naptime Nancy. Naptime Nancy aims to help victims' family members get answers at long last by sharing unsolved cases of missing, murdered, and unidentified. Mel, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you? And thank you, by the way, for having me on.
Yeah, of course. It's so good to have you. So I know that you have a personal connection to true crime, and even at one point believe that you might have a close connection to the Golden State Killer case. Can you share a little bit more with our viewers about what got you into true crime and a little bit more background about that story for those who are not familiar with your podcast?
Sure. Yeah. So I was never really, aside from watching Dateline, I hadn't really gone down any rabbit holes for true crime until I started to think about my mom's, my mom was abused by her stepfather. And when I mean abused, it's so much more than, it was like 10 years of psychological torture, kind of like sadistic, awful, awful stuff that she hasn't even told the worst of it. So I knew that this guy's still free out there. He's still with my grandma. I never really got to know her, but I just started thinking what if there was other people out there that he's hurt, other kids? And I started to just kind of think about it more. And I thought, well, maybe the next time my mom brings up these things, I will ask her, what her thoughts are on that. And so one night she did, and I was pregnant already and hormonal as it is. But when she started saying, well, I said, were there any local rapists or anything around your area in Rancho Cordova? I had no clue, zero clue. That she was like, well, there was the East Area rapist, I want to say, and we were all afraid of him. And I was like, well, that sounds like a thing. Let me just Google it. And from there, it was we didn't sleep for weeks. We were so scared. And yeah, he was even in the same areas and moved to Colorado between 81 to 85 and then back to California. So it was oh my gosh, it's got to be him.
There's an explanation for the break.
Yes, which was a really good lesson. When his DNA came back negative, it was a good lesson for me to not get super tunnel vision on one person when, looking into a case. But yeah, that's what got me started on it. I just couldn't just be well, my family's not directly involved, so I'll see you guys later. I don't care about you, So that's what kind of snowballed my love for advocating for true crime.
Wow. And so it's so terrible that she had somebody in her life and so close to her that was so awful that your family believed that he could be this terrible killer. That really says something about him.
It was terrifying. Yeah. And my mom still is terrified of this guy to this day. It's not, it's not like he's not a dangerous person, like you said. And what really gets me is that I didn't know, like, I'm not sure like who all would be familiar listening of like the specific details of cases in the East Area Rapist case, but one of them was like a little girl described through hypnosis a bull tattoo on the forearm. And I didn't know anything about my mom's stepdad. I didn't tell her details. I just kind of like let her, or I would ask specific questions just to see what she would answer. And when I talked to her brother, I said, did he have any tattoos? And he said, yeah. I said, where was it? On his forearm. What was it? A bull. And he said, it was, so it was really weird.
Whoa, I didn't know that.
Just like the Shire Lane sketch composite. So when we saw that, we were like, oh my God, it's him, which who knows, he was the type of guy that was coming in through the sliding glass door all sweaty in the morning and then would look at all the kids like you didn't see anything, so
wow.
Who knows what he was up to, but he wasn't the Golden State Killer, which I'm now thankful for because I can't even imagine being directly connected to that. Yeah.
Right. Well, this has been a really interesting time for anybody that has been intrigued by the Golden State Killer case. It's probably the case that terrifies me the most. It's probably the one that I've gone down the most deep dives into. I read any of the books that come out, any podcasts, like whatever. Like it's definitely a terrifying case of somebody sneaking into your home when you're most vulnerable, asleep, and attacking you. Did you get to watch the plea hearing? What are some of your thoughts on some of the recent updates in the case?
I would say that I actually did not ever expect for him to plead guilty because he's more of like a psychological, like he likes the power and he feeds off of people's fears and control. But so I was very surprised by that. Very glad for all the survivors and victims' family members because now they don't have to wait that 6-7 years or whatever that they were anticipating the case or the trial to take before it could even get to that point. And we all know that he likely is not gonna live that long. He could, but in prison, like you've seen him, he looks so frail, and part of it's an act and part of it's him starving himself. So
yeah. And I mean, the act of starving himself could spur something on with poor health. Like he could be making himself weaker, which I'm fine with.
Oh yeah.
I think it's an act, but I think that he could be could potentially be creating some health situations for himself.
Oh, for sure.
Which is fine.
Yeah, I always thought that he was going to try and die before he was officially convicted so that he could, kind of not have to be officially connected to the case. But I'm glad that it happened the way it did and that they've all acknowledged the survivors of the East Area Rapists. Like, I don't know if you'd seen those pictures of like Debbie Domingo and Michelle Cruz. They all got together, even with Bonnie, Joe D'Angelo's ex. And I just thought that was so cool because, I mean, to be able to embrace to all come together like that, it was empowering just looking at the photo. So
cool. Empowering.
Yeah.
Well, to switch topics just a little bit, one of the things I love about your show is that it is scripted. It's a nice mix because I feel like there are so many true crime podcasts out there or so many comedy podcasts that are a little bit lighter weight. And I love that yours is so well researched and it's so well written. Out of all the research, out of all the cases you've done, which one has been your favorite to research?
Wow. There's so many that I wind up, it takes me forever to actually get something ready to record because I go down so many different rabbit holes. Like it's my passion to do that. But I would say it's Elaine Faye Letnin's case, which is the Navy officer that disappeared in 1976 from Napa, California.
I don't know that story. Can you give us a little bit of background on this one?
So she was 31 years old and had just transferred to Mare Island Naval Base, and she was an instructor for the Combat Systems Technical School Command, and just like 5 foot, she was the first woman to ever be a part of like the presidential 100 like rifle championship, like part of the Navy's rifle team.
Wow.
So she was a big deal, you know. And so when I saw that she went missing from inside her own home, I was like, what? You know, it's such a crazy mystery that, and like most of the private investigators, I mean, the 2 that have researched the case in the news, they think that she was murdered and her body's within 50-mile radius of her home. And I tend to lean that direction as well. Yeah.
Wow. I'm going to have to listen to your episode on that, because it's one I'm unfamiliar with, and that sounds really interesting.
It's quite the case. There's, the last episode, someone had sent me a tip thinking that notorious spy John Walker was the one. He was arrested in 1985, but they thought potentially he had some connections to her, since they were at, I want to say, at least 3 different naval bases at the same time. But it was, at the very least, all I could say about the progress with that is that it stirred the pot, and there are people coming forward, and it's exciting to hear that. And I really hope that there's some good that comes out of this.
That's great that that seems like an older case, but that's so great that we're kind of living in this era that some of these 40, 50-year-old cases are being reopened with new technology and such. It's very cool to see. And I hope that we maybe eventually get some resolution for that one as well. Well, Mel, it's been so great having you today. Can you let our viewers know where they can find you on social media?
So you can find me more often than not on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Naptime Nancy DRW.
And don't forget to subscribe to Naptime Nancy wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. If you haven't already, be sure to check out our special episode of Week in True Crime with Kathy Kleiner, who survived Ted Bundy's brutal attack during the rampage at the Chi Omega house.
I was lying on my left side, sound asleep, and I heard a noise. And this noise was our bedroom door opening and sliding against the carpet. It wasn't a loud sound, but it made me wake up a little bit, and I'm still sleeping.
This week on MurderMurder.news, Bookstagrammer Emily from Coffee and Washi Tape reviewed Lakewood by Megan Giddings. Lena is a Black woman dealing with the loss of her grandmother and the responsibility of caring for her mother and all the medical bills that come along with that. Feeling overwhelmed, she is invited to join a clinical study, and upon realizing the monetary gain and possibilities of being able to comfortably care for herself and her family, including fantastic health insurance for her mother, she agrees to sign up. Emily declared it a must-read, so be sure to check out her full review on MurderMurder.news. We love reading your comments, so long as you're not an incel troll, and we wanted to thank the Clark Perrys for commenting that it sucks that crimes against transgender people never make it into the media, which is so true.
Thanks to Fiona Gallagher for mentioning she hadn't heard of I'll Be Gone in the Dark, but she's planning on watching it over the 4th of July weekend.
Thanks for tuning into This Week in True Crime with Murder Murder News. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button below and give us a thumbs up, and tell all of your true crime friends about our cult.
If you just can't get enough true crime, join our commune at MurderMurder.news for our Monster Book Club and cold case solving groups. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. See you next week.
Bye.